Everyone in the private ICU believed Daniel Royce was unconscious. Tubes ran from his arms, machines hummed softly around him, and his chest rose and fell in slow, controlled breaths. Doctors whispered outside the glass walls, charts full of complicated words and cautious timelines. To them, Daniel was just another wealthy patient fighting his way back from a catastrophic accident. What no one knew, what no one even suspected, was that Daniel Royce, self-made millionaire, sharp-minded investor, and famously guarded man, was fully awake. From the moment he had regained consciousness days earlier, he had made a choice that would change his life forever. He decided to pretend he was still in a coma. At first, it was fear that kept him silent. He had heard the doctors say his recovery might be fragile, that stress could undo everything. But soon, another reason took hold: curiosity. Lying still with his eyes closed, unable to speak, Daniel became invisible. People spoke freely around him, assuming he couldn't hear a word. He heard doctors discuss his prognosis with cold professionalism. He heard lawyers argue about business decisions at his bedside as if he were already gone. He even heard distant relatives argue over what might happen to his fortune. Each conversation peeled back a layer of truth Daniel had never been allowed to see when he was healthy and powerful. Yet none of it shook him the way the voice of his night shift nurse did. Her name was Clara. She was different from the others from the very first night. Where some nurses were efficient and distant, Clara spoke to him gently, explaining every small thing she did even though she believed he couldn't hear her. She adjusted his blankets carefully, checked his four with steady hands, and sometimes, when the ward grew quiet, she talked. At first, it was harmless, telling him what the weather was like outside, joking softly about bad hospital coffee, or saying, "If you can hear me, Mr. Royce, you're doing great." Daniel wanted desperately to open his eyes and tell her he could hear everything, but he didn't. He stayed still. Then one night, everything changed. The rain hammered against the hospital windows, and the hallway lights were dimmed for the late hours. Clara sat beside his bed longer than usual, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. She sighed, thinking she was alone with a man trapped in silence, and began to speak in a voice heavy with emotion. She confessed how she almost quit nursing because life had worn her down, how her mother was sick and the medical bills were piling up, how she worked double shifts just to keep the lights on in a small apartment no one ever visited. Her voice trembled as she admitted she was terrified of failing, of becoming bitter, of losing the kindness that made her choose this job in the first place. "You know," she whispered, brushing his hand as if he were still somewhere far away, "people think money solves everything. They look at patients like you and assume life must be easy. But lying here like this, it reminds me that no one is untouchable." Daniel felt something break inside him. In all his years of chasing success, building empires, and protecting himself behind wealth and control, no one had ever spoken to him like this, honestly, vulnerably, with no expectation of reward. Night after night, Clara continued. She never asked for anything. She never complained about him. She spoke about her fears, her small hopes, the way she still believed kindness mattered even when the world seemed cruel. And Daniel listened. He listened until pretending became painful. He listened until he realized that the people who praised him when he was rich and powerful were absent now, while the one person who believed he could hear her, who treated him like a human being instead of a headline, was the woman sitting beside him every night. The day Daniel finally opened his eyes, the room erupted into controlled chaos, doctors calling for tests, nurses rushing in, monitors beeping faster. Clara froze, her eyes wide, her hand still resting on his arm. When the room finally cleared and the noise faded, Daniel looked straight at her and spoke in a weak but steady voice. He thanked her. Not just for her care, but for her honesty, her kindness, and her courage. Tears filled her eyes as she realized he had heard everything, every confession, every whispered fear. She apologized, embarrassed, but Daniel stopped her. He told her she had reminded him what it meant to be human. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. But the real transformation happened outside the hospital room. He changed his will, funded his mother's treatment anonymously, and established a foundation for nurses facing financial hardship. Clara didn't know any of this at first. She only knew that the men who once lay silent now smiled when she entered the room and treated her with respect she had rarely known. On the day Daniel was discharged, he finally told her the truth, that her words had saved him in ways medicine never could. As he left the hospital, he realized the greatest wealth he had ever gained came not from pretending to be powerful, but from being powerless enough to truly listen. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that kindness spoken into silence can echo louder than any fortune, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because the next story might just change the way you see the world too.